Hey guys, Bartel's Bookshelf here with a tag video. I'm very late to this. This is the Deja Vu book tag, which revolves around rereading. I was tagged in this by Criminali like a month ago, but as I've mentioned in my previous videos, I've been sick with COVID, and now that I'm getting out of COVID, I'm still like really tired and I have no energy. So if I seem really out of it and loopy and tired, that's why. I apologize. I know I've been kind of up and down with videos lately, but there's been a lot of shit going on. But I'm making this finally. Finally, I apologize, Ollie, for taking so long to get to this. But oh, and I should say, this tag was created by Walker Writes, and I will link them in the description. And yeah, part of the reason I thought this tag would be interesting is based off of the first question. Do you reread, and how often? And the thing is, I don't really reread. In fact, the rereading is something I've only kind of started doing fairly recently. Sometimes, like, I'll reread, a favorite, like a really big favorite every once in a while. There's certain books that I always come back to. But most of the time I don't really reread. I think last year I reread 4 books, which was like a huge amount for me in terms of rereading. So I don't reread very often. In fact, it's very rare for me to, in any given year, to reread anything. And that leads into the second question: why do you or don't you reread? And really the main reason that I don't reread as much is because there's so many other books that I want to get to. I mean, look around me, Look at all these books. All of these are books that I have yet to read, and those are only the ones you can see. So, so yeah, a lot of the times there's just not enough time for me to reread, so I just don't. I'm sure a lot of bookworms can relate to that. I mean, I am fairly lucky in that I'm pretty young. I'm 30, so I have hopefully I have a lot more time ahead of me to read and eventually reread. But right now, like, there's just so much out there that I'm inundated with that I want to get to, that I want to read, that I just don't have time. That said, the next question is, what have been your favorite books to reread? And as I said at the beginning, I do have old favorites that I sometimes go back to, that I go back to occasionally. One of which I've mentioned before is Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Brite. That's like one of my favorite books of all time. I've reread it, I think, 3 times now. I love it. I read it in 2014 for the first time, and it just blew my head open. It's a great book. Alice in Wonderland is another favorite from that I reread frequently. I think I've read that at least over 10 times, I'm pretty sure. I've gotten up into the double digits, I'm pretty sure, with how much I've reread that book. I love it. It was hugely formative to me and to my interest and my sort of sense of humor and just everything, my tastes in art. I love it. It's a classic, deservedly. But yeah, that's about it, really, in terms of rereads. And of course, that leads into the next question: what would you like to reread? And there are definitely some books that I've read in recent years that I would like to revisit. One of which is The Last Unicorn. I read this also in 2014 for the first time, and I haven't reread it since then, but I've seen the movie tons of times. I love the writing style of the book. That is one that I would really like to reread at some point in the future. I think it's a beautifully written book. It's a wonderful story, and I think as time goes by and I become more familiar with it, and it sort of seeps its way into my consciousness more, it's become more of a sort of a comforting presence to me. I've noticed as I've sort of gotten older and I've sort of honed in on what I like to read, with the things that appeal to me the most. That's kind of my weak spot. Is very, very florid, beautifully written, imaginative fantasy stories. That tends to be kind of my comfort zone. So I would really like to reread that. I would also at some point like to reread The Long Goodbye by Raymond Chandler. That's another one of my favorite books. I read that, I think, in 2015, 2016, maybe later than that. But I read it a few years ago when I was in a big like crime noir phase, and I love Raymond Chandler. He's one of my favorite writers, and I think that is probably his masterpiece, his magnum opus. And I would like to reread it just to kind of revisit that world and that inimitable writing. I just love it. So yeah. Now, this is an interesting one. What book do you predict will be so good that you will want to reread it? So this is tough because, as I said, I don't reread much in the first place, and two, it's hard for me to kind of like make judgments about books before I've read them. I mean, aside from like first impressions, I guess a book that I hope will be really good. I got to think about this. A book that I hope will be that I'll really enjoy, that I've heard a lot of good things about, and that I think will be conducive to rereading is this one. This is The Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. This is volume 1 of the Reread Revelations. This is a sort of a, I guess you'd call it sword and sorcery fantasy series. I've heard a ton about it. People say like the bromance is really great and the characters are a lot of fun and it's just really entertaining. And I've been sort of developing a taste for that kind of fantasy, that just very like straight ahead, sort of traditional, just very almost comforting fantasy, very very like straight ahead, very traditional, very fun. It's not necessarily trying to be like high literature, but it's just really good entertainment. That's what I've heard about this book, and I really look forward to that. I do want to read this at some point. But right now there's so many other things I'm in the middle of. But I've heard a lot about this, and I hope that this is really, I hope that this is just as good as I've heard about it, and I hope it'll be one that I want to reread in the future. Pick a book from your younger years that you think would be interesting to reread. Now this is really interesting because I don't actually own a lot of books from my younger years that I can reread, and I don't, and the ones that I do own from my younger years I have reread many times, like, as I mentioned, Alice in Wonderland. Oh, you know what? Actually, I do have one. Hang on, let me grab it. So a while ago, I was I was kind of having a little bit of a phase where I actually was rereading some older children's books that I remembered from when I was a kid. I mean, of course, I've reread stuff like Goosebumps and Animorphs. I've talked about that before. There was another one. I remembered this from when I was younger. This is The Case of the Wandering Werewolf by Drew Stevenson. This is a middle grade chapter book about a guy and his sister, I think, who are trying to track down a mysterious werewolf. And of course I enjoyed this because, werewolves. And I just remember there's a lot of like distinct things that I remembered about this book. Like there was a thing where like one of the main characters gets like his pants pulled off by the werewolf, and like some girl like wolf whistles at him as she drives by and stuff like that. There's this character who's he's like a very like stereotypical like horror nerd type. He's always watching like B movies on his VHS player and stuff, and I remembered him very vividly. And I also remember the illustrations as well. Oh, in fact, there's the scene I was talking about. There you go, you can see that. So yeah, it was just one of those random memories that came back to me, and I was like, huh. I wonder how that would hold up today, so I might reread that at some point, we'll see. But yeah, so there you go, Case of the Wandering Werewolf. Tell us a series or book that's so big or complex you need to reread to better understand. This one's easy. It's a big box set on my shelf, so I'm not going to take it down, but one that I really do think I need to reread is the Book of the New Sun series by Gene Wolfe, which I have this really nice Folio Society edition, which I showed off in one of my other videos. I read all 4 books several years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I can't remember, and I really, really loved them. As anybody who's read the series will know, it's very dense, it's very complex, and I know there's lots of things that I missed the first time around that I would only be able to pick up on a reread, so I really want to, at some point, go back and read them again. I don't know when, but yeah, that is one that I would do, that I do think I would need to revisit to fully kind of grasp. Is there a specific type of genre you think is best/worst for reread potential? That's tough because really, like, I guess it depends on the type of book it is. I guess I don't know about genre necessarily, but there are definitely books where they're more plot driven and it's more about kind of the surprises and the twists and turns of the plot, like thrillers and mysteries and that kind of thing. That I definitely think wouldn't necessarily hold up on a reread because you're already aware of all the twists and turns of the plot. And of course you don't necessarily have to have that to enjoy it. I mean, I've read mystery novels where, like, Raymond Chandler, like, the mystery isn't really the point of the book. It's more about the atmosphere and the characters, so you can just enjoy it from that perspective. But But something like Agatha Christie, I don't think I could see myself rereading, because it's the kind of thing where it's like, once you know the mystery, to me anyway, there's not really anything to keep you coming back. There's not really any type of like character or like atmosphere that really would like keep me wanting to like revisit it, if that makes sense. I guess best, I don't know. This is a tough question. There's a lot of tough questions in this. For me personally, I think, as I said, I think the best for me is just that comfort, just comforting, well-written, poetic fantasy. You know, as I've mentioned, Neil Gaiman, Last Unicorn, Clive Barker, Poppy Z. Brite, like writers that are very imaginative and fantastical, and also are very beautiful, have very beautiful, very poetic, very lyrical writing styles. Those tend to be the things that I keep returning to. So I think that would be my choice. I think also just as I mentioned before, I've been sort of learning more of the comforts of just a good traditional fantasy story. I'm going to talk about it later in my wrap-up, but I read the first Drizzt book this month, and that was a lot of fun, and that was a very kind of straight-ahead traditional fantasy that was just very enjoyable in its, not simplicity, that's not the right word, but it was just, it was very tropey, but it was executed well in a way that I found very comforting and very easy and fun to read. So that could be something that I could see myself returning to. The next question is there a book you've liked more upon reread? This is an easy one. I've talked about this several times before on my channel. Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice. I reread that last year with some friends. That just so happened to coincide with her death, and I really, I was sort of muted about it when I originally read it, like in 2014 or however long ago that was, 2015. But coming back to it again, like I really appreciated the denseness of the prose, the atmosphere, sort of the intentional, the deliberate nature of the pacing. There was just a lot more to it that I really enjoyed upon reread. So that was definitely one that I really increased in stature in my mind upon rereading. And of course, the next question is there a book you like less upon reread? And this is tough for me, again, because I don't reread much, so I haven't really revisited a whole lot of books that I disliked. Yeah, to be honest, I can't really think of any off the top of my head. Because even like when I've gone back and reread books from when I was a kid, like, I don't know, Goosebumps or something, like there's still things where I can be like, okay, like I'm older now, like this isn't as sophisticated as it seemed when I was a kid, but I still enjoy it for like nostalgic value, or like I enjoy it within the context of being like a story for children, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's hard for me to really say. I'll have to come back to this once I've reread more books, I guess. And number 11 is, if you reread, let us know a book you'd like to reread before the end of this year. Honestly, that's probably not going to happen unless I just end up picking a book that I've reread with friends or for a group read or something. But I mentioned before some books that I would like to reread. Another book that I would like to reread that I've also talked a lot about is Count of Monte Cristo. But again, that's a really long, dense, complex book, so I don't know when that'll happen. And honestly, I don't know. I don't have a lot of books around me that I've read already, so I tend to get rid of my books as soon as I read them, unless they're like really good, big favorites that I really want to come back to and keep. So yeah, I don't know. I'm bad at this. Sorry, but and the last one is Tag People. I don't know. I'm bad at this booktube thing, so I'm not as social as I should be. I'm not great at building relationships. I'm sorry about that. But and a lot of the people that Ollie tagged are people that I'm already aware of or who I already watch. So it's like, I guess if you're watching this video and this sounds fun to you, tag, you're it. Go for it. So yeah. There you go. That was the Deja Vu tag created by Walker Wrights, and I was tagged by the wonderful Criminali. So yeah, again, thank you for tagging me in this. This is really interesting and it gave me a lot to think about in terms of my own reading habits. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I hope you guys did too. And if you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Until then, I'll see you guys later. Bye.